Good afternoon, everyone. I am Michael Steelman, Director of Alumni Career Management and Professional Networks at William & Mary, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar, Creating Peak Experiences. Today's webinar is part of the William & Mary's inaugural Professionals Week and is made possible by the support of the William & Mary Alumni Association and its One Tribe, One Network initiatives, providing relevant career and professional programming for all alumni in all career stages. Today's presentation is being recorded and will be notifying participants once the recording is available. Questions are welcome throughout the presentation. If you just roll over the bottom portion of your Zoom window, you should see a Q&A icon appear. Please use that feature to submit your questions. Throughout the webinar, I will monitor the questions and share them with our presenter at the end of his presentation. Additionally, Dennis may ask a few short answer questions throughout his presentation. Please use the chat feature icon to submit answers to those questions. Now, without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest presenter today. Denis Beausejour is a proud graduate of William & Mary and earned his MBA from Kellogg School of Management. He has lived and worked internationally throughout Asia and the Americas, and now resides in a suburb of Chicago where he works for O.C. Tanner, a global provider of workplace culture services. Leveraging O.C. Tanner's Culture Cloud suite of offerings, Denis consults with Fortune 1000 companies on how to create peak employee experiences throughout the career cycle that lead to high-performing work cultures. We are truly delighted to have Denis join us this afternoon on our third day of William & Mary's Professionals Week to share his advice with fellow alumni of the William & Mary community. Thank you so much, Denis.
Hey, thanks, Michael. I'm really excited to talk a little bit about what O.C. Tanner is up to lately. Our aim is to help people thrive at work, and so I thought I'd share some of our research because that's really what helps drive our entire innovation. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about the global culture study first. It kind of dissects corporate culture, how it functions, and how all the parts work together, and what organizations can do to affect it. So we did the study about 6 months ago, and we talked to over 15,000 employees and leaders. And today I just want to kind of dive into just one of the groundbreaking insights that we discovered. So it seems pretty crazy, right? Today there are more technologies than ever before to help us connect, and yet we actually feel more disconnected than ever. I know that feelings of isolation and loneliness are at an all-time high, and we've seen satisfaction with peer-to-peer relationships continue a 30-year line. So as we're getting started here, I'd love to just throw out an open-ended question to kind of see what you guys feel is in this increasingly connected world. So I'll do some maths or some thoughts from what you guys think are causing it. So anthropologist Robin Dunbar has really spent decades trying to talk through social connection and social. He really recognized that even though we have 7 billion people on our planet, most people follow very similar social structures. And so most people, on average, only have about 150 friends. How he sort of labeled friends was this idea of a two-way connection where both felt like they were in a symbiotic relationship. Now, some of those friends might be good friends or best friends, and there might also be people that you know that are kind of more acquaintances or people that you might only recognize on site. But these numbers were really uniform across. I don't know if this sort of feels right with everyone, because when I saw this first, I sort of thought, man, but I know all those TV actors and I know all those, politicians or actors or sports players or whoever. How is it possible that I only can recognize 1,500 people? But when you start kind of writing down names, you'll start to realize that there really are a lot less people than you kind of think that you know. So what I thought was really interesting about this research is that Robin Dunbar realized that there were actually only two limitations that kept these numbers so small. I thought that maybe as social media and some other technologies arose, that we would sort of be able to enhance these and we could maybe have more friendships or more acquaintances. And certainly social media sort of makes you think that, because you have 5,000 Facebook friends and 3,000 follow LinkedIn, and you can tweet with anyone in the Twitterverse. But really, the limitations hold fast. One of those is brain capacity. So there's only a limited amount of information that each of our brains can handle, and unfortunately mine isn't growing anytime soon. I think of a good friend that I introduced their newborn daughter to some other friends recently, and I accidentally called her Isabel instead of Abigail. So that kind of set our friendship back a little bit, Maybe we went from good friends to just being friends. Anyway, the other limitation is free time. You kind of have to have some disposable time on your hands to be able to actually make friends, keep friends. And I know a lot of time, we'll talk about this water cooler to have interactions on site where the people, because that's what grows friends. So those two limitations, I started looking into spending our free time lately, and I was really interested with some of the outcomes. So currently, the average American spends close to 11 hours a day at electronic media. So it could be television, radio, smartphone, internet on a PC, or other screens, maybe video games or whatever. I'd love to hear from you if these sort of things kind of sound normal to you. Do you watch 5 hours of television a day? Or do you feel like there are some other pieces of this that you resonate more with?
Dennis, I'm just going to interrupt. I think there might be some issues with your sound breaking in and out. So just a heads up, if people are missing out on some things, just let us know and we'll make sure Dennis, I'm not sure if it's the internet or something connection-wise might be interfering. But as a reminder, while I interrupted rudely, I apologize. Please go ahead and use the chat feature to respond to some of Dennis's questions that he's posing here related to this particular slide.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. So with such a high proportion of hours interacting with media, I think the average person is feeling really overscheduled and really busy. I think usually when you ask someone these days, other than the generic, okay, I'm doing okay, usually the next most popular thing is, oh, I'm just so busy right now. And so that busyness kind of leads to sort of fewer meaningful interactions, fewer social interactions. And actually, we've seen in a lot of instances that chip network is actually collapsing a little bit. So if I may, have any of you guys seen The Paradox of Choice or read the book? There's a really great TED Talk. I think it has about 12 million views. But one of Barry's main points is that when you increase choice, by definition, you actually make people feel worse about what they've actually picked. And there's 4 reasons that that kind of happens. One is kind of or anticipated regret with making the wrong choice. I know I sort of had that feeling when I was trying to choose the right college, but luckily I went to William & Mary, and there's just no other school that's anywhere as good. The other one is opportunity cost, worrying about maybe you spent too much, or maybe there was something else that you could have done. The third thing is super interesting. It's an escalation of expectations. So when you have more options, you feel as though you should be more satisfied with the outcome because you could choose. Sort of this whole idea that if there's only one choice, it's kind of like the world's fault that you didn't get exactly what you were looking for. But when there's tons and tons of choices, you sort of leave feeling dissatisfied because you should have found something that perfectly fit your needs, and it doesn't always work that way. And then finally, these feelings of self-blame, where you really look at what choice you made, kind of tell yourself, oh, I should have been the one that made a better decision here. One of my favorite quotes from him is that how we value things depends on what we compare them to. So when there are lots of alternatives to consider, it's easy to imagine it's easy to imagine the attractive features of alternatives that you reject that will make you less satisfied with the alternative that you've chosen. So trying to kind of put this into more of a work situation, it's really interesting because most people sort of traditionally had spent a whole career with one company. And so they didn't really have a lot to compare to. There was sort of this idea that, you were a company man and you kind of worked day in and day out, and you didn't really know what you were missing because you didn't really have many experiences to compare them to. Well, now it seems like the average iOS developer spends somewhere between 1 and 2 years at a company before moving on to another one. The average salesperson spends about 4 or 5 years at a company before moving on. Even in situations like medical care, you see nurses jumping from one hospital to the next, or doctors jumping from one practice to another a lot more than you ever have in the past. And so with those jumps creates an issue where employees now have a alternative. They have seen how another place interacts with maybe it's something about mastery of how good they are at their work. Maybe it's meaningful work. Maybe it's that they had a better connection at another company. Maybe the rewards and recognitions were better. Maybe there was better work-life balance. There's a lot of different pieces that can kind of make you compare. Maybe 80% or 90% of your current job is amazing, but that last 10%, you knew it was way better at your last job. And so it's creating this whole sense of dissatisfaction in our culture that I don't think we've ever really experienced before, and I don't think we're really prepared to handle. So when it comes to your coworkers, I think that a lot of times it's that same problem. Even though you've only spent 1 or 2 years with your current coworkers, you remember the time that you spent 3 to 5 or 10 years with previous coworkers and how they had sort of become your family. And so loneliness isn't really the physical absence of other people. It's the sense that you're not sharing anything that matters with anyone else. So I love this quote because people want to share things that really matter. Deeper than the superficial social chatter on Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, I think people are craving connection and things that are important to them. And they're looking to find that where they spend most of their time, which is at work. So what are they exactly looking to connect to? So what I want to talk about today, I think a little bit, is trying to look through a lens of connection when you're trying to, when you go to work, trying to figure out how you do connect with your employees or with your peers or with your boss, and really trying to understand what matters most to you and also what matters most to the other people that show up every day. I think connection can be super powerful. It's the stuff that gathers us into groups, and it's been really fun to kind of study this idea of connection because I think connection is at the heart of every great culture. So what we found with connection is that it is enhanced by strong connections are built by experience. So when you think of the people you work with or your team or your organization, really try to think through a little bit about how those connections were formed. How did you decide that you were going to be, a lot of people have a best friend at work. How did that happen? Was it that you showed up on the same day together and were clueless and kind of instantly bonded? Was it that you took over for their position and they really helped you to become masterful in your current job? Was it a mentor at the company that really helped out? Think through why you have such strong connections with people. And you'll kind of land on experiences. I know I have a colleague, Kathy, whose brother passed away unexpectedly a couple months ago. And she's a pretty important part of our Chicagoland team. And so I called my wife and I was like, hey, uh, Kathy's brother's funeral is in St. Louis. We live in Chicago. I really want to support her, but, we had just had our second kid and things were crazy. And I just thought, does it even make sense to pack up and go down there? And, she was so resolute in her decision. She was like, if the situations were reversed, Kathy would, in a heartbeat, drop everything and show up for us. And so we decided to pack up our 2-year-old and our 10-day-old boys and make an 8-hour trek down to St. Louis. And that is time that I would never ever change. I mean, I'll never forget the look that she had on her face when we walked in. It was just shock and disbelief. And I would say that today that continues to be one of her peak experiences here at OC Tanner, because really it kind of went to that next level. It wasn't just an experience, it showed that care. And so what was great is it was a peak experience for us too. We got to meet her extended family. We got to get to know a little bit more about her. And we really got to kind of color in some of the details that you don't necessarily see at work day in and day out. I think the problem is that usually when you show up to work, I think you're really trying to focus on taking away the negative experiences that people have. I think a lot of HR departments spend time just really trying to reduce all the negative interactions that someone has. And from the research, we really realized that it needs to be flipped. You need to be focusing on creating amazing experiences, because those experiences are the ones that are going to get someone through a tough time. Those are the experiences that, whether it's something as silly as a certificate on your wall or a gift from someone that really meant something to you, whatever that is, it reminds you of a time where you really felt fit and belonging, and you really felt loved and cared for. Peak experiences can create connections that really just, drown out the negative ones. And so I would just urge you all, as you're considering what does a peak experience, what can that do for you? And it really can drive that connection that you would have with other people in your organization. So peak experiences are powerful, they're meaningful, and they're a source of powerful connection. And when those connections happen, those are the things that are going to take your culture forward. And so I just wanted to take a little bit of time to just talk through how to create peak experiences. I thought one of the best things to do would be just to kind of walk through a couple of ideas and then just share some of my own personal experiences that would maybe help you create peak experiences of your own. So really, creating peak experiences starts with creating perfect moments. And what I mean by that is that behind every great experience, somebody else, if you think through your own peak experiences in your mind, somebody else took time and energy to make that experience happen. They put a lot of work into it, and you don't really feel that when you're in the peak experience, but it's definitely been arranged. And so one of the things to do is to try to create a system or process that works for you so that you can consistently create these perfect moments that would hopefully turn into peak experiences. Some ideas around that is how is great work celebrated in your office or factory or wherever you are? How is it celebrated? And if it isn't celebrated, what are some triggers, talking back to Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit, what is some trigger that you can create that would help you systematically deliver a routine to celebrate great work? Similarly, what can you be doing to notice effort day in and day out? Sometimes it's hard to do that without making people, you want to make sure that everyone's included, and there's a lot of questions around that. But it's really important to really focus in on creating some sort of system. I know that if it's something like a milestone, like a birthday or an anniversary, it might be as easy as just putting it in your phone or Outlook calendar and creating a recurrence. If it's something a little bit more tricky, like maybe you've just finished an awesome project and you really want to find a way to celebrate all those people, maybe it's something symbolic that everyone would kind of get if they were working on the project, but maybe not get so much if they weren't involved. Either way, it's just really, really important to figure out what would work for you. And so I put up these ideas as a way to kind of think through what are some things that you would ideally want to celebrate when you're at work, and what are some ways you can go about creating a process that would enable that to happen on a regular basis. So I guess I have a couple of examples here, but one of my favorites is just talking about that simple, easy process. Here at OC Tanner, we have a weekly or monthly email, depending on how many new hires we have, that goes out to the entire company. And it's pretty cool. It just has a picture of them, it has their name, and it has their email. And it's a clickable email, so that if you click on someone, it automatically pops up, and you can kind of type in a little message to say, hey, welcome, we're glad you're here. So I kind of saw that, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I got 71 welcome emails in my first month at OC Tanner, and I was totally surprised, because if that email hadn't have gone out, I probably wouldn't have gotten as many. I'm sure my boss would have still said, hey, we're glad you're here, some of my coworkers. But there was a scheduled mechanism that kind of encouraged people to reach out and say hello. A lot of times people don't feel like they can reach out and say hello, or they can't because it's like they're wasting time. And so you got to really think about how your culture is being perceived. Because if you're making people feel like they need to be working every single second of the day, that they can't even stop for a second and say hello or say welcome, then it's going to lead to other issues down the road when people are less trusting of each other. So on the left here is my first birthday that I celebrated with OC Tanner. And we went and got ice cream after lunch, which is probably dumb, but I love ice cream. I make it myself. I'm from Cincinnati. And for any of you guys on the phone that know Grader's ice cream, it's like the best ice cream ever. And so Lauren, who's on the left-hand side there, she had a friend that had opened an ice cream store in Wheaton recently. And so she had set it up for us to have a private event there and get to taste a lot of different ice cream. And so the whole team rallied around, and we got to go have a really cool experience. And I just thought, man, it didn't take that much time and energy to set it up, but it was the thoughtfulness behind it that really made it great. Alternatively, we had a couple people that just joined the organization within the last year, and they had their 1-year anniversary. And so we were kind of thinking, how do we make them kind of feel special? They had kind of started around the same time, and so they had gone on training together and had sort of developed a really great friendship. And so we thought, we got to find a way to celebrate these guys together. And so we brought them in for a lunch, and we ended up going to one of their favorite places, which is a taco place. And we found a blow-up gold balloon and some confetti cannons. And we had a photo shoot. Now, I'm going to be honest. I wasn't really quite sure how the photo shoot thing was going to turn out, because some people hate getting photos taken of them. But I thought, hey, they're in the recognition business. They're probably going to love the photos, even if they are a little bit uncomfortable while we're doing it. So we put on some music, and we had a fashion shoot for their 1-year anniversary. And I'll never forget Anne on the left-hand side was just like, man, you guys are crazy. This was definitely a peak experience. And so, um, again, it doesn't need to be the same each time. It doesn't need to be consistent. It doesn't need to be equal. But what's important is trying to find ways that it's special for the individual. And so usually we kind of come up with a acronym, which I'll call SAIL. And that whole acronym is, first of all, when you're kind of giving a speech or kind of talking about what someone's done, it's kind of 4 easy ways to kind of remember how kind of what happened. So the S in SAIL is situation, kind of giving a brief recap of what's going on and what had kind of happened leading up to it. Then A is accomplishment, just taking some time to really talk through what the person did, spotlighting their attributes and their talents that are unique to them. Third, kind of talking a little bit about impact. So inviting a few people to come up and kind of talk a little bit about what they did and how it affected the company and how it affected them, and kind of expressing appreciation. And then fourth, linking it to a company value. There's this whole idea that there's a shared belief or a shared story that we all have when we come to work together. And each employee is kind of trying to decide whether they want to engage with that story, or whether they don't really want to engage. And so really it's important to try to link it to not just necessarily a value, but a story that's really strong with the company. Because kind of the stronger the story is, the more it will it has a chance of floating up to being a peak experience. Because you think about some of these great companies, and sort of everyone kind of knows the history. Hewlett Packard, the guy started in the garage. So if you can show some sort of sense of entrepreneurship in the company, you can kind of tie it back to that like moment. Or I think about Fred Smith at FedEx. He started his company based on a paper, and I think he got like a C or a D on the paper. And so even though he was kind of told, no, this is a bad idea, he still had that chutzpah to go out and make it happen. And so whatever that thing is at your company, I think it's really important to kind of put story around that, and to really try to drive what it is that you value in your company. Because as you start recognizing that, and as you start celebrating that, it'll just continue to pervade the culture and continue to make people feel like, oh man, yeah, I really need to do that, because that's what gets celebrated around here. So the last kind of advice I'd love to give is to try to put yourself in the shoes of whoever you're trying to recognize. Some people have been burnt by public shows of recognition. Maybe someone snickered at them or made fun of them, and so they don't want to stand up on a stage. They would prefer it in public. Some people might enjoy an experiential moment, like I did with the ice cream. Some people might prefer an award or a piece of symbolism that's deeply meaningful to the organization. Just remember that words are powerful, and whatever you say or do, remember that most recipients will remember what you said. Even if you don't think it's particularly meaningful, I think it'll be really meaningful for them. So do we have any questions about how to create peak experiences?
Well, first off, Dennis, thank you for getting us thinking about this and how we can make our communities at our workplaces more exciting and more rewarding and positive in our sort of support to each other's accomplishments. I think that's I like the SAIL model that you recommended. And for those of you that are maybe missed the very beginning, just roll over the Zoom window and you should see a Q&A icon. Please go ahead and just use that for the questions for Dennis. And then some of you have commented on the chats. Certainly a recommendation for The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath. That people recommended that to those in the sort of discussion of the experiences that you brought up. My question leading off to where you were just there is, how do you actually capture what your colleagues or employees want, like without intruding in or some extensive survey? Are there strategies of doing it in a way that is okay among the HR rules and sort of policies to make sure you're
Sure.
not breaking any comfort zones? But you do want to know your employees, and everyone has their unique comfort zones. And I think that's what's really challenging, is sometimes you don't know where you want to acknowledge and how to best acknowledge, even though you want to acknowledge, given your point that people like to be more publicly or privately sort of recognized.
Yeah. So I think that really depends a lot on the situation. So I know my wife is a teacher at a high school, and what she did with all of her aides was just sent out a quick survey. It was a half sheet of paper. It was like 10 questions, and it was like silly stuff like, what's your favorite candy? What's your favorite chocolate? What's your favorite movie? Just like a get to know you type of a thing that had some questions on it. But in the back of her mind, she was saving them so that when there was a moment where someone was to be celebrated, she could kind of reflect on that and kind of make sure that she had kind of the right mix of things. So, it's funny because people won't really remember taking that survey. People go through so much information all the time that they won't really think back to that specific moment. And instead they'll feel like you kind of remembered or somehow know miraculously about them. So I would encourage that if it's a smaller situation to sort of think about maybe just reaching out and with a little survey, because most people will respond, and you'll kind of be surprised by how quickly people forget about that.
Cool. And then how do you reverse this to the leadership, in the sense of how, as an employee, do you get your management level to see the value of these types of activities and recognition when they feel like sometimes it might be a waste of time or not investing that interest in it?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really tough if your company isn't, your leadership isn't vested in that. It is hard because you almost feel like you're doing something wrong when you do something that feels natural, like recognizing someone else. Some people, I've seen them sort of just take the initiative and do something maybe outside of work hours, maybe inviting their team over to their house for a barbecue, or trying to find other ways to be personal, even though during work hours, the leadership has sort of made it clear that there shouldn't be any of this type of, stuff going on. Another idea is to do it via email or some other way that work already happens in your organization. I think, again, power of words are incredible. So if you send an email saying, hey, I just really want to take a moment and thank you for what you did here or there, it's less visible in the organization, but it still means a lot to the person who's receiving it.
Great. And so there's a couple questions about the remote employees and how to build these peak experiences given not physically being together. I
Sure.
know Teams and Slack are some really neat technologies out there that many corporations and organizations have been utilizing to encourage sort of casual conversations among their employees. But I'd be curious to see how you've advised clients or others to build peak experiences for remote workforces.
Yeah, even with Teams and Skype and whatever else, Zoom, the video, it's great, but it still starts when the meeting's supposed to start, and it still ends when the meeting's supposed to end. And so it gets really tough to have that sort of informal hallway chatter that you usually, you would have had if you had walked to a meeting room together or walked out of a meeting room. Some ways companies are trying to do this is to try to come up with core hours. So I've seen companies where they say, hey, at least 4 times a week, we want you to be in the office between 10 and 2. So it might still allow for some flexibility on people's, being able to come in early or leave or stay late or whatever. But it's a way to kind of really stress the importance of face-to-face time. One of the ideas is that in those 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever of core time, that you're actually only doing meetings. So the idea is that email is closed at that time, that you're not actually trying to accomplish any of your individual mandates, but that you are actually trying to just get all the things you need done, whether it's team calls or whether it's project meetings or whatever. But those are usually in situations where a lot of they have a history of having siloed, departments or pieces of the organization, and so it's really an attempt to kind of reframe what teamwork really means. Alternatively, on the remote side, we found that creating more structure in terms of mentorships or coaching has been crucial. So one of the things that we've done here in the last year is a lot of our offices are remote. And so we've created, for whenever we hire a new person, we actually have 2 people that are called peer mentors. And they'll actually schedule some regularly scheduled time, even though they're not in the same office, to spend some time just to answer those informal questions. Like, I had a guy call me the other day, can I expense my phone bill? And we had a nice 15-minute conversations about the phone expense policy, which really is dumb, and he would have felt really stupid asking his boss about. But it kind of creates an informal network where people can ask those questions and kind of have those hallway conversations without really having to, be in the office together.
This is great. So the Dunbar research that you showed earlier about the social relationship and stuff, where do colleagues fall into that? And I guess, the question becomes sort of, they could be in all levels, but you think of your size of your workforce. You said 71 people sent you this email. Now, do they become into the acquaintances? Do they then fall into, how does that, with your size of your company, your workplace and stuff, like fit into that whole
Sure.
formula of things?
So actually, surprisingly, most people do have a best friend at work. So at least one of those 15 people would probably fall into a work or a former work category. And unfortunately, the way our brains work, we don't really think about work and the rest of our life that much differently. So really, they're all kind of tossed in here at the same time. So the people that are probably in your office or in your part of the office would probably fit into being good friends or friends. Whether you like them or not, they're still a known entity that you kind of see on a daily basis. And so, they fall well within this framework.
And the rest are all your William Mary friends, right? That's the
right.
The
That's
best.
right.
No, this is terrific. And some of the questions too, going back to developing meaningful relationships. How do you, everyone's so tight on time, and in many industries and professions, time is money. It's their billing, and they're limited on, how many projects they can get done for the client and so forth in a certain amount of time. And they have families and other things that are pulling them in before and after hours of work. How do you have a casual sort of get to know conversation without feeling like you're intruding on their efficiency or success in their day-to-day work? Is tough. And I think, are there suggestions on, it kind of goes back to your survey thing, but as a peer, not necessarily surveying a team, or just to get to know yours, like, how's it going question was raised in this question that an alumna asked. And what would you advise we think about to be respectful of our colleagues?
Yeah. So I think I think if you actually look at experiences, you'll find that usually there's common experiences that people have with their peers, where the reason that they're as good of friends as they are is because they started at the same time and went through orientation or onboarding or whatever together, or because they are proximate in location, or because they did have to reach out to ask for help and the other person was willing. I think people quickly realize when they've crossed the line in terms of whether someone is interested in having a conversation with you or not. And I think that we just naturally kind of go towards people that are also looking for something. some people might have been with the company for much longer periods of time and already have established friendships and don't need another friend at work. And that becomes pretty clear, I think, as you go. But it is an interesting idea. I think companies more and more are trying to find ways to create these informal gatherings. You kind of hear about people bringing back the alcohol cart on Fridays, or having a keg in the kitchen, and or I don't know, trying to find ways to create some social lubrication so that some of these things can happen at around the office. But remember that it's really experiences that end up driving this. And a lot of times, I think it's why it's helpful for people to raise their hand for special projects, because you get put on a cross-functional team and you develop experiences while you're working and creating value for the company. But you're creating those new connections of how you interact with new people in the organization. And so we've seen a ton of really positive studies come out about creating these cross-functional teams or special projects to try to drive not just engagement, but also try to drive connection across the company so that people are less siloed.
No, this is really great. And there's been some comments raised about, the importance of finding not necessarily a great job, but great team of people to work with, and the value of relationships at work. We spend a lot of our hours with our colleagues, and the importance of getting to know one another and supporting each other's accomplishments as colleagues is really key. One thing I'm curious too is what you've been seeing about Facebook, Instagram, and how we friend our colleagues in a way that is comfortable. And I think that's LinkedIn obviously is a professional culture, so to speak. So it allows a little bit more of an ease to, of course, I'm going to connect with my colleagues on LinkedIn. But when it comes to Facebook or Instagram, there might be more political or more religious or more social things that people want to keep a little more private. But the reality is that as you open those up, it almost allows for this getting to know your colleagues better in a way that's you can support them and be proud of their things that they're doing outside of the workplace.
Sure. I think, LinkedIn is clearly inbounds, right? Because it's a professional network. For some of the other ones, I think that it's totally about trust. How much trust do you have with the people that you work with in the organization? And because on average, I think people are relatively distrustful, right? They don't want to show what they're like in case they get rejected by someone else in the organization, or someone saying, look what they're doing on the weekends or whatever. What I've seen is that people, especially with Facebook and Instagram, people are really you can kind of tell who your true friends are at work, because you probably are connected with them on other social media sites, because you're not afraid of the judgment or whatever else that might come from those people. And so I know other people have rules, like I'm not going to be connected to anyone on Facebook that I work with. And so maybe when I leave, I'm happy to connect after that. But so a lot of people approach it very differently, but at the center, the crux of the question is trust. And so if you feel like you have that trust at your company, then you might be more likely to share personal information. And if you have less trust of the company, then you're probably less likely to share.
So we have more time, but I think if anybody else has any more questions, please do feel free to chime in on the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll conclude a little on the earlier side. I do want to do a few plugs. We have Professionals Week is halfway through, so to speak. We have events online tonight. We have one more online networking hour this evening on career stages, so peers in your career level at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Anybody around the world can participate, and encourage you to network with peers, either mid-career, second act, and re-careering into or relaunching your career after some time away, as well as another webinar tomorrow, another alumna from the Chicago region. So Terry will be doing a great webinar tomorrow at noon Eastern. And then on Friday, there's an industries-focused online networking hour as a great way to strengthen the connections across the William & Mary community. I think similarly to your work colleagues, we hope that you take a lot of this support that you learned today from Dennis on recognizing and acknowledging the accomplishments of our alumni. I mean, is a great way to be proud of the William & Mary community. So I encourage you, if you have colleagues that are alumni, to talk about them this week during Professionals Week, to put it online on social media with the hashtag #OneTribe1Network, but not just this week. Talk about it throughout the year. Use the SAIL acronym that Dennis broke down, in the situation, accomplishment, impact, and linking it to what you studied at William & Mary, or linking it to a professor that you took together. I think it's a really neat way to think about how not just your colleagues, but how as professionals we support each other broadly, and with our affinity of William & Mary. I think it's a really neat. I think this webinar was quite fitting to have this week in the middle of the week. So I appreciate you, Dennis, putting this together and sharing your expertise in O.C. Tanner's research with us. With any other questions, I do want to just also put out there is how do you where does this fit? I was going to ask this question. Where does this fit within an organization? Is it under the HR includes D&I area? Is it under, where do most companies that you've worked with in your area, is it leadership teams across different areas, or is it really an HR-led initiative? And where, if people want to take more proactive measures in their workplaces, where should they go to within senior leadership within their organizations?
Yeah, sure. I think that there's a lot of studies out on the ROI of effective recognition, and so you can maybe start there if you are really trying to challenge your leadership team on that. A lot of times, the best in class I've seen is that someone is just a champion for these types of moments, and it shines through. Their passion shines through. And so those people could be sitting in talent acquisition, maybe a recruiter or something like that. Could be in HR, traditional HR. Could be in sort of corporate internal communications, and it could also be sitting with someone that's on the leadership team that feels really strongly about it. So I guess all that to say, I've been surprised at who is the one that's usually driving these types of initiatives. Usually you do think HR, but usually it's actually someone else that is partnering with HR to help spread it across the organization. It's not actually just HR by itself. So.
Well, it could be anybody watching then today. Take initiative, be proactive, be the great William & Mary graduate you are. And for those of you watching this recording on demand, I encourage you to keep that motto going forward. And Dennis, thank you again for preparing this, sharing your expertise with the William & Mary community today. Hope you have a great rest of the William & Mary Professionals Week, and go Tribe, and enjoy the first day of spring.
Thanks, Michael.